Hi, welcome to this video where I'm gonna be swatching all of my iridescent single eyeshadows. There are a few shades that didn't belong into any group that were pretty unique that I ended up not including here. So the shades that I included here are only the ones that I felt were similar enough to each other, or that at least would be helpful to see how they compared to other shades. If you would like me to talk about the unique iridescent shades that I found, let me know and I can also make a video about that, although it really wasn't many. Most of them just fit into one of these families. Now please note that when you see the swatches, I did turn the exposure down so that you can really see the tones, because when it is the normal, brightness, it can be hard to see the exact tone of the shades. Most of these are from Terra Moons, Clionadh, Copacetic and Devinah, but there are other brands here as well. There's some Glam Shop, there's some Looxi, Pretties for Your Face, Give Me Glow, Menagerie. The majority are those first brands that I said. And there are a few shades that are discontinued, but I felt it would still be helpful to include them because in case you have them, you might not need the other ones. Actually, before we get started, I just want to say a few things about the formulas. For all these shades, I would say I don't have performance issues or application issues with any of these. They all perform relatively well for me and they apply relatively easy for me. But I do want to point out a few shades and formulas in particular. Overall, if I don't mention anything, it's because they are, your standard middle of the road, not too dry, not too creamy, smooth formula. But there's a few shades and a few formulas that I just want to point out in case it matters to you. First is one shade from Terra Moons in this video. Terra Moons has more shades like this, but in this video there's only one, which is Sublunar, and it is on the flakier side. It is one of those that is a little bit harder to swatch, but on my eyes it applies just fine. The other shade that is also flakier, has a little bit more like if it was tiny, a little bit gritty, is Pretties for Your Face True Love. That one feels gritty, but again, on my eyes I have no issues. And then other formulas that I want to point out that are overall, the formula is, I think, a little bit different, is the Looxi Beauty formula. That formula is a little bit more silicone-y, kind of squishy in the pan. I know some people have issues with creasing with formulas like that. Copacetic Cosmetics, some of their shades, not all of them, but some of them have almost like a dry oil feeling where it's hard to transfer the shadow from your finger to your arm. Like you're always gonna have some left over on your finger, and it also like wants to bunch up, so it is harder to swatch, but on my eyes, again, I feel like they work fine. And the last formula is the Dandylions Cosmetics formula. That formula is on the dry side, and I believe all their shimmers have this dry formula to the point that if your skin is absolutely clean, there's no moisture, nothing on it, it's really hard to get it to stick down because it just wants to fluff away. So for a few of these swatches, I had to put a little bit of moisturizer on my arm, pretty much because I was washing my arm in between the swatches, so the Dandylions shimmers, they just didn't want to stick to it. So for a few of these, I have just a teeny tiny bit of moisturizer. But again, the Dandylions formula, I feel that on my eyes, because I do have oily eyelids and I usually have something on my eyes, either sunscreen or primer, I feel like with that they will work fine. It's truly just the completely clean dry skin that they won't stick to and they will fluff away. Okay, this is it. So first we're going to start with the ones that I'm calling pink to gold. There are a lot of eyeshadows in this category, but of course I'm only going to talk about the iridescent shades. However, I just want you to know that depending on the shades that you have, like Clionadh Blaze, Devinah Tucana, Terra Moons Venus, those are also pink to gold shades. And depending on how you want to use these, if you just want to use this as toppers, those shades might be enough for you. You don't necessarily need an iridescent shade to work like that for you. I do think that if you want to use this on your inner corner and if you have a lighter skin tone, then an iridescent shade would make a difference. But these are just very common shades overall, and I think a lot of brands have at least a version of these shades. So here in the first group, I think you can see these are all very, very similar. there's a slight differences in the tone, especially I think on the tone of the shift. But I mean, I think that you can be fine with just one of these. At the top we have Clionadh Gleam, then Devinah Alien, then Copacetic Bowling Alley, then Pretties for Your Face True Love, which has that grittier texture, Terra Moons Europa, and Glam Shop Poswiata. I have no idea how to pronounce that. So yeah, these to me are all like very similar. And then on the second group, I think the first three shades, which is Devinah Sweet Slush, Terra Moons Andromeda, and Glam Shop Pink Platinum, I think those three are also, you know, the same as the first group. They are all interchangeable. I do think Pink Platinum is a little bit more neutral. The pink is less saturated overall. But still, I think it could serve a similar purpose. Now, the bottom two shades, I think, are more different. The bottom two, the first one is Dandylions Prickly Pear, and then we have Copacetic's I Choose You. Prickly Pear, I think you can see, it has a lot of a white pigment to it. I think it's a little bit lackluster. I personally don't like that shade. And I Choose You is just an example of a shade that isn't an iridescent. It does have like a tan base, but I think it could still serve the same purpose as the iridescent ones, if you just want to use this mostly as topper shades. Now we're gonna go to the pink to green ones, and I have a lot less in this family, so let's take a look. First here we have Clionadh Gloaming, then Terra Moons Lunar Spectrum, and Sydney Gray's Take Me Away. And I know you're looking at it and thinking, Regina, why is Take Me Away here and now with the pink to goats? And I know, I kind of made a mistake, but let me explain. So first, Clionadh Gloaming and Terra Moons Lunar Spectrum, the top two, are exactly the same, but Gloaming is more sparkly, Lunar Spectrum is more smooth. Now, Take Me Away is an in-between shade. I originally had this with the pink to gold, because it is truly a pink to gold, but it's just much more saturated. The pink is a lot more hot pink, and the gold shift, when I had it with the pink to gold shades, just looked green. So I moved it to this group here, and then when I swatched it with these, then I could see that even though the gold shift looked very green compared to the other pink to gold shades, it is still a pink to gold. So this is like an in-between shade. I do think it belongs with the other family, but it's in between the pink to gold and the pink to green for sure. Okay, now we're gonna look at the pink, red, I don't know how to define this color, you're gonna see, to orange. So first we have Terra Moons Red Giant, then we have Copacetic Foliage, Devinah Menagerie, and Terra Moons Sublunar. I do think the closest ones here are Terra Moons Red Giant and Devinah Menagerie. They're the closest ones in terms of the tone, although I think you can see Red Giant pulls a tiny bit more red, while Menagerie pulls a tiny bit more pink. I do think Copacetic Foliage pulls a little bit more purple, but I think you can see that they are like the first three ones are truly very, very similar. The bottom one I think is the most different, which is Terra Moons Sublunar, which is the flaky shade that I talked about. The tone of it pulls more orange, and the shift pulls more gold, but I still think it belongs somewhat in this family. Now we're going to talk about the orange to gold family. At the top we have Devinah Zira, then we have Clionadh Flicker, Copacetic Honey Bunny, and Terra Moons Phoenix. These are all different, and yet I think that for some people only one of these could be enough. I personally don't like Clionadh Flicker. It's the second one. I think it's just very dull, not shiny. I don't like that shade. I think it's just lackluster. And I think Terra Moons Phoenix, you can clearly see that it is just less saturated. The orange looks much more like a gold, but I do think it's still an orange. When I put that one with the gold shades, it just pulls very, very orange. So again, it's one of those in-between shades, hard to define, but I think you can see that the shift is very similar to the other shades. Copacetic Honey Bunny I think is like the most orange of them all, and Devinah Zira, although I think it's an orange, it does have that pinky red tone to it, which is why I decided to compare it to Sublunar, because Sublunar pulled more orange when it was with the pinky reds, and Zero pulled more pinky red when it was with the oranges. But I think that when you see them side by side here, you can really see that Zero really is more orange, and Sublunar really is more pink. Now we're going to talk about the purple to pink, what I'm calling loosely as purple to pink. So first here we have Clionadh Glisten, Terra Moons Euphoria, Copacetic Kitty Cafe, Devinah Sprinkle Whips, and Devinah Kazuko's. Now the first three I think are, interchangeable. They are pretty much the same. The bottom two are more different. I think you can see they do have a kind of a deeper base, even though I still consider them to be more sheer. Sprinkle Whips, I think you can see it's a little bit lighter than Kazuko's. The tone is slightly different, but they're just very, very similar. And I think, again, that if you're using these as toppers, these could be used interchangeably. I think that they're going to give you a very similar effect. Now, these two here are also purple to pink shades, but they don't fit in with that first group. The tones are just very different. And these are overall much more subtle. They're not super shiny, they're not super sparkly. They're just really overall more nuanced, subtle shades. Personally, this is not what I reach for, but I know a lot of people like these. So at the top, we have Dandelions Twilight, and at the bottom, we have Devinah No Comies. Now we're going to talk about the blue, teal to purple. Again, I'm very loosely trying to categorize these because it's hard to pinpoint the colors. Here on the first group, I think you can see these are all the same to me. We have Menagerie Pearl, Terra Moons X-Ray, Devinah Rain Tarts, Looxi Now and Maybe Later, Looxi Cookies and Cream, Clionadh Glimmer, Copacetic Arcade Arena, and Glam Shop Forget Me Not. I do think Glam Shop Forget Me Not is the most wet looking of them all, but I think, as you can see, they are all just pretty much the same. If you have one, you probably have them all. Now this other group, which it's like the teals, like these shades, if I put them with the greens, they look blue. If I put them with the blues, they look green. So I guess these are teals. The top three, I think, are the same. Menagerie Snowball, Terra Moons Half Moon, Devinah Twinkle Toots. Again, those are interchangeable to me. Then the number 4 and number 5 to me are also dupes to each other. Terra Moons Counting Star and Devinah Everlasting Gobstoppers. Pretty much the same. And the bottom three are ones that I couldn't fit with, like, they just are not dupes for any of these shades, but they're still in this family of like the blue to purple. We have Menagerie Tranquil, which has, I don't know if it has a shift, it's just very subtle. Devinah Swatch, which I think you can see the shift, it's more like a pinky purple. And then Looxi Electric Lemonade, also in the same family, but different. Okay, now we have this other group, which is Devinah Marama, Terra Moons Space Baby. Those two are dupes for each other, just Marama is more sparkly, Space Baby is more smooth. Terra Moons Atlas is one of those, again, that I feel like could fit into this family, but isn't necessarily the same as any of the other ones. But again, it's up to you to decide if you think it's worth having multiple of these or just one of these. The bottom three to me are also dupes for each other. We have Clionadh Glow, Looxi Cookie Dough, and Pretties for Your Face Icicle. Those are also for me interchangeable. Now this last group here, it's one that I almost did not realize that these were dupes for each other, because whenever I try to compare these with any of the other blue to purple or teal to purple, they just didn't fit in. They just felt much more neutral, and then I had the idea to maybe compare them together, and that's when I realized that they were actually pretty much the same. Top one is Devinah Bubble Fist, second one is Glam Shop Turbo Mist, and the bottom one is Menagerie Junko. I do think Bubble Fist is closer to Junko. Turbo Mist doesn't have the shift as strong as them, but these are like neutral blue shades. They have like blue and pink sparkles throughout them, and then they have this more clear pink shift, but they do have like that multicolor sparkle to it. A really pretty shade, actually. Now we have two that I'm considering the blue with gold sparkles, and top one we have is Copacetic Hugs and Kisses, and then the bottom one is Devinah Nerds. I think you can see they're not exactly the same, but I do think that they have a very similar effect. The Copacetic shade is sparklier and more wet looking, but they both have sort of like a slightly blue base with this gold sparkle throughout. Now we're going to talk about these green to purple shades. I do think that for some people, these are not going to be considered iridescent because they have a yellow base, but because I think this can be used as toppers, I decided to include them. Top one is Terra Moons Lyra, and the bottom one is Devinah Fairy Fire. They are exactly the same. Terra Moons one just has a bigger particle size, so it does look sparklier. Okay, now we're gonna get into the last part of this, that I'm calling them the greens golds. These are all slightly different from each other, but personally I think this part is going to be quite overwhelming. It was very overwhelming to me to figure out what to compare to each other because they are all very similar. I had to split them into two groups because I could not fit them all in my arm, but to me they could all be interchangeable. They have like slight variations. Some of these pull more gold, some of these pull more green, some of them pull more neutral, and the second group are the ones that I felt were slightly more neutral, but overall they're just very, very similar, and I guess I clearly like these shades because I have so many different versions of it. So on the first group here we have Terra Moons Saturn Rings, then Terra Moons Light Ear, Devinah Proteos, I have no idea how to pronounce that, Give Me Glow Electric Unicorn, Terra Moons Snow Globe, Copacetic Garden Picnic, Devinah Butter Pucker, Copacetic Pool Party, Glam Shop Puzek, and Clionadh Gilding, I don't know. I do think that Light Ear, Proteos, Electric Unicorn, and Garden Picnic are dupes for each other because they do have the like green teal shift that the other ones don't have necessarily, but I do think that these shades on the eyes just end up looking very similar even if they don't have the shift. For example, I think you can see the difference between Saturn Rings and Light Ear is that Saturn Rings pulls more gold while Light Ear pulls more green, but in the end I just think that they are just very, very similar. Then on the second part of this, we have Clionadh Glint, Terra Moons Chiron, Terra Moons Celine, Glam Shop Blizzotka, I have no idea how to pronounce that, Devinah Sour Spanks, Dandelions Seraphine, Copacetic Cookie Crumbs, and Menagerie Moonflower. And again, I think you can see, for example, Sour Spanks is a little bit more neutral, but also all very similar. I wish I had included Meteorite here. Unfortunately, that shade is in a custom palette, so I completely forgot to pull it out for this. But Meteorite would fit in here. I think it would be closest to Sour Spanks because it is on the more neutral side of it, but it's still definitely part of this family. This is it. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if I missed any shades. Let me know if you have any other comparison requests. If there's any shade that you have been wanting to know if it's a dupe or not and was not included here, just let me know in the comments, and if I have it, I will let you know what I think. I might have missed it, or it might be one of the more unique shades, although I think I did a pretty thorough look at all my palettes and I pulled all my iridescents out, but there could be a chance that I left something out that I didn't notice. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you on my next one. Bye.